Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us so early. We're an intimate group here. I encourage you, if you'd like, move on up, because it's a pretty deep room, and we want to be as close and be as helpful as we can today. And while you're up and moving, we're going to start, since we're at 9 a.m. today, we're going to start with a little bit of movement today. So I'm going to pass it over to Portia to introduce this part.
You have your own mic, right? So used to sharing my stuff. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Portia Dunkley. We're going to do a little movement exercise. It's a exercise that I do with my students just to get them going when we start our classes in the morning. And also, it was something that I learned from a master teaching artist. His name is Coxe Dennis, who works with Arts for Learning. So everybody get on up. Get to your feet if you can. We're not forcing you to do anything, but do it. All right, everybody up and close. All right, come on, crew. All right. Okay, so we're gonna keep a steady beat together. All right, so this is a call and response. When I say I go, you say I may. Okay? I go. Amen. I go. Amen. All right, so I think you got it. Come on in. Start the beat. All right. Now put some air. Get low. Now make a circle. Y'all feel good? Yeah. All right, come on, bring it out. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for that. I think that kind of puts us in the mood to have this conversation today. So my name is Sandy Feliciano. I am a manager with Coxe, Curry & Associates, and that's a fundraising consulting firm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm also a musician. So this morning we're going to talk about my crystal ball, and what that means for me is demystifying and looking to the future of the grantor and grantee relationship. So I want to first introduce our amazing panel to speak on this subject. So if you want to just introduce yourself, your title, your role, but also what perspective you bring to this room, please, let's start with you, Portia.
Good morning again. Portia Dunkley. I'm from South Florida, Miami, to be exact. 305 in the house. Where y'all at? Okay. Represent. I am the CEO and founder of an organization called Violini. It's a mobile music education program for early learning centers and preschools. I also work with after-school programs to provide music educational services. I'm also the founder of New Canon Chamber Collective, and that is a collective of music in a South Florida-based ensemble that uplifts the voices of Black and Brown composers and musicians in our community, providing equitable pay and opportunities for them to perform high-quality music and concerts for our community.
Hey everybody, I'm James Hirschfeld. I am a program officer at the Howard Gilman Foundation, which is based in New York City. I'm here actually kind of at the last minute, filling in. I come to this conference to listen and to learn, but I'm here today because I was asked to be participating on this panel about grant making and applying for grants. Before I worked at the Howard Gilman Foundation, I worked at a nonprofit applying for money. And then before that, I was a freelance trombonist working in the city trying to make my way as an artist. So the perspective I'm bringing today, I do work at a foundation, but every single foundation is different. I can't speak on behalf of philanthropy. I can speak on behalf of my experience as a human being, as a program officer who works at the Howard Gilman Foundation.
Hello, I'm Alexis Smith. I am the Associate Vice President for Strategic Innovation and Special Initiatives at Manhattan School of Music. And in March, I'll be the Senior Director for Anti-Racism, Equity, and Belonging at the Public Theater, which is a new role there. Thank you. That's so kind. At Manhattan School of Music, I've participated in a lot of projects where we've been asking for money, both from private individuals and many times from foundations. I also was a recipient of a Sphinx Venture Award in 2021. So that was really the first time I put together a large-scale proposal for a big chunk of money. So I bring that perspective as well. And my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you all. So we're talking today about an equation. I'm thinking about grantee plus grantor equals impact. That's what we're going to talk about today. And again, we're kind of focusing on private foundations. And you can apply for grants for government funding and corporate foundations, but we're going to highlight, because of our experience and our knowledge, that communities each have these private foundations that you may be looking to apply for grants for. We're going to try and demystify that process. So now that you know a little bit about us, I do want to know a little bit about you in this room, because I really want to be helpful to you if I can. So just by a show of hands, and if you're online in the chat, if you want to put an emoji up, how many of you in this room have applied for a grant or funding in the past? Just by a show of hands. Okay, a lot of you. Great. How many of you in this room are grant makers or funders on that side of it? Okay, thank you for being here. And then who in here is thinking about applying for a grant for the first time? Okay, we got a few. Okay, so we hope to help each of you in this conversation today. The truth is, if you're in this room, you are seeking to make impact. You're seeking to look to the future of philanthropy, of arts in your community, and so we want to be helpful. We're going to root this conversation today in truth, understanding the givens, the limitations that exist in philanthropy. And I want to open with a quote that I heard on Thursday that I felt fit this conversation and this topic. The quote is, "Truth without hope is failure, but hope without truth is fantasy." For me, that means if we just accept that philanthropy exists as this system, it can feel like failure. It can feel impossible without that hope. But if we only look to imagine a dream beyond the reality of it that exists, that is also fantasy. We need both to really understand how we move forward in the current state of things in philanthropy. So truth without hope is failure, but hope without truth is fantasy. I want you to keep that in mind. So we're going to start with that reality, that truth. So I'm going to ask each of you, what are the current limitations and challenges that exist for you as a grantee or a grantor? I'm going to start with you, Portia.
I started the last time. No, the current limitations. Well, I didn't mention this part, but I do bring the perspective of an artist-run organization, small single-person organization that has applied for, I'm like in my third year applying for grants, right? And some of the limitations that I face as a small organization, resources, time, energy, just being able to figure out, prioritize where I need to spend or maximize my time in researching and applying for grants through foundations. And that's just a reality of where I'm at right now. I can't apply for everything. I don't qualify for everything because my budget is small. So those are the limitations that I'm facing right now.
I'll jump in. So at a large institution like Manhattan School of Music, obviously we're a school first. And because we're a school first, there are certain things that we cannot do. So a big part of what I've tried to work on in my time there is trying to figure out ways to scholarship underrepresented students. But you cannot create scholarships or ask for scholarship money based on race. So because it's illegal in the school system, for good reason. So that means you have to be really creative. So for example, I can't get a scholarship for Black kids from Philly, but we can give a scholarship to graduates of Project 440. So we have done that. Blue Shelton is one of those recipients, brilliant flute player, he's here. So there are boundaries even at a large institution. We're also tuition dependent, as most conservatories who don't have an enormous endowment are tuition dependent, and that's not always attractive to funders. But it's a reality. It's been a reality for the past 100 years for us. So I think those are, for me, the most difficult boundaries. But again, like, you can never let those boundaries stop you from the work you know that you need to do. So being creative and having a lot of unstructured discussion about that has really helped us, so that when we can go to a funder, they can tell that we've been really thoughtful about how we want to get to the end result. And it really also lets our ethos shine through.
Well, I'm a program officer at a foundation that works within the field of philanthropy, and I'm working within a system, and it's not a very good system. I think we just have to kind of put that on the table, and especially working within it, you see even more how it's not a good system. It's a system that was developed by, I think, some pretty rich people. I don't know the history of it, but certain people do. And it was meant really as a tax, it's an item in the tax code. And it's not a system that was set up to equitably distribute resources to make the world a better place. It was really there to shelter wealth, and then you have to give around 5% of that away each year, which is really a small amount considering that, some of these endowments get larger and larger. So as I work at philanthropy, I push up against some edges here. For example, the 501c3 system. Many foundations require, not all, but some require that you have a 501c3 organization. That's a lot of work. Another thing that comes up is you need to have a minimum budget. So at the foundation I work at, our minimum budget is $250,000. That's a lot, right? If you're a music ensemble, you're a chamber music group, you're a string quartet, $250,000. So that's a rule that's not set by me, that's set by our board. I don't have access to, change those kinds of rules, but as Alexis said, you can work within the system, you can be creative, you can find other ways. So that's the challenge of my work, is trying to be impactful even with these limitations.
Thanks for highlighting that, James. I think we want to go into then what are the options? If you live in a community where you don't feel that you fit the priorities of certain foundations that provide funding for the arts, what are your options if you don't want to file for 501c3 status? So I think, Alexa, I want to start with you, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you learned when you were applying for funding for your project.
Sure. So for the Sphinx Venture Fund, I really loved putting it together because I could just put down a dream for $100,000 and not have any boundaries. I think it's a really important thing that Sphinx does. And so, I'm someone that can put together a budget well and detailed, partially from being at MSM for so many years, partially because I went to business school, so I know how to do that part. Narrative is easy for me. So when I saw that you could do that, I was like, okay, let's try. Why not? Because then, very least, I'll have a good idea on paper, what I think is a good idea. So when I got it, I was like, well, shit, like, I work for institutions, I do some consulting, but I don't have like a company. And I have to say, I learned a lot in business school about how to make an LLC. I didn't learn a thing about nonprofit so I said, well, I know how to make an LLC, so I'm just gonna do that for this one. Like, but there's this internal thing where you're like, I must have a 501c3. Like, and when I really looked at the options, I was like, I don't need that right now. One, maybe I want to ask for money down the road, but for now I've got money. And I need to show people what I can do with the money before I ask for something else. So I thought, okay, I can still solicit, donations, and if people want to give me money to support our singers in my competition, they'll do that, and they have, by the way, and I haven't even done anything yet, right? So when I show them how great I can create a competition and all this, and they'll see that, then it will be a moment where I can decide, okay, do I want to use the LLC and then as an umbrella for maybe other projects, and then create this 501c3, or do I just want to leave it as an LLC and, if I want to apply for funding from a foundation, there's other ways I can leverage other options to still apply for those funds. Like, you don't have to have the 501c3 to apply. And frankly, an LLC is like very straightforward to manage. And if you don't know a thing, you can look on YouTube and you can go to a bank. Any bank will sit down and tell you what you need to do. And you can go to inkfile.com and in 30 minutes get your EIN number. So I think all of us have felt this need to like legitimize our work with the 501c3. But you really need to take time to look at the options and see if that is really right for the work that you're doing, because there's a lot that comes with making that 501c3.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing too, Portia, your story.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of what Alexa said, so I actually did that, the same thing when I started Teeny Violini. And everybody was like, oh, it's a great program, go get a grant. And I had taken all of these grant writing courses in college and still was afraid to write a grant. And I'm like, well, what am I gonna show? I don't have any work, I don't have any proof that I can do anything. And the same thing, so I, took Arts at Men, and part of Arts at Men was, we did business administration. And so I said, well, let me just incorporate as a for-profit, as a social enterprise, right? And do a pay-for-service, figure out what my costs are and what I want to make, and just sell it and see who bites. And that's how I got to build up my portfolio. That's how I got to show that I'm actually doing the work that I say that I can do. And what I have found in this process is that, when I apply for a grant with a private foundation, I thought that I needed to be a 501c3. And still, for a while, I still struggled with legitimizing my work as, the work that I do with that nonprofit status. But they were like, well, why? So many people were like, well, why are you, no, keep ownership of your, of your business, of your organization. Apply with a fiscal sponsor, which a lot of them are fine with, and just continue to do the work. And so, that's what I've done. And I found a lot of success in using that model. And I think for us as individual artists, I think there's a takeaway. I think what happens with not having to, do all the paperwork, figure out all the filing for a 501c3, it takes that stress off, right? And so you can focus on whatever you need to do and however you need to prioritize your energy so that you can diversify your streams of revenue now. Don't just be focusing on a private grants, a private foundation funding, but you can really start to prioritize your energy so that you can decide where you want those, that revenue to be generated from, and then do the work. We're not filing tax forms and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And so, those are some options for you if you hadn't, thought about that. And that's what I've done, and I've found a lot of success,
Yeah, I just want to add one thing too, which is there's a lot of value in partnering with a 501c3. So for my competition, you know, I have my LLC. My two partners are New York City Opera and Manhattan School of Music. Manhattan School of Music's the host. So in theory, if someone was like, I would love to give you $20,000, but you know, I need that form, right? I can say, okay, well, in my budget for labor, for production costs, that comes from the MSM side, so let's restrict those funds to the competition. They can donate that money to Manhattan School of Music, get the form they need, and I still get the benefits from that. So I think working with established 501c3s, if that feels organic to your work, that can be really beneficial, not to mention like the mailing list and all the other access you might have. But again, being creative. There's not one path here.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like this is the part of the crystal ball where we're like demystifying. Perhaps if you're an artist with your own nonprofit or your own venture, what it looks like to receive those funds and resources for your vision. I want to move to a question about impact, and I'm hoping to hear from you, James, and each of you. I want to talk about impact because that's the theme of this conference. And a lot of times when we're applying for funding, whether we're in a medium, large organization or the founder of our own nonprofit, we are trying to communicate that through the narrative. We're certainly trying to show that the dollars received will make the intended impact. And so I want to really unpack that word. What does that mean to each of you? What does it mean from each side, I guess, if we're going to call it grantor versus grantee? So I'll start with you, James, if you want to just give your definition of impact, if you have one.
Sure. I think that you need to define your own impact and what impact you want to have in the world. And so that's different for everybody. And we just got through reading a round of new applicants, and I'm always amazed at the new things I read about that honestly I'd never even heard of. Like, I didn't even know maybe there was a nonprofit in New York that's all about dancing on ice. I didn't know that existed, right? So we're constantly surprised by the creativity of the people in our community. So once you define what impact is for you, and you should be doing that in your mission probably, or in your vision, somewhere on your website, somewhere in your application, then you have to talk about how you are meeting that impact. So if you say that you are, that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, that's the impact you want to have, your narrative needs to show how you're reaching that. So I really like to let people define their own ways of success, what that means to them to be successful, and then show how they've been successful in whatever they've done.
And when you're applying, how do you look to do that? And where is energy best spent when you're applying for a grant? Have you found in your experience? Maybe Portia, if you want to share.
With regards to impact, right? I try to look at grants, proposals, when they ask the RFPs or any grant that's out there. I try to look at the ones that are for me. Like some, they'll expect you to do all of this work to measure impact. I know my limitations. My reality is this. This is my truth. I can't, although I aspire to that, and my hope is that I will reach that one day, I look for the things that I can do that I have the bandwidth to manage. If you say that you define your impact and write it in a narrative, I could write you a narrative all day, okay? I got you. I got your narrative. And so it's important for you to do your research in that way. Yes, we want to be able to, apply for that. And what if you get it? What if you get it? Now you have to manage it. Now you have to show the work, And so some people don't really think about what the work or what the energy that goes into making that, having to prove and show what a grantor is asking you how, to define your impact. And so for me, I'm like, I have to be realistic. Although I am idealistic, I have to be realistic about what I can actually do with regards to showing and proving, okay, yes, I know I do the work. If you want me to say or get stories, anecdotes from parents and teachers and kids and show you videos, I got you. So that's how
I think for me, what's been really a really good lesson has been to keep your eye on the focused prize. And I'd say that in thinking about my competition is a competition for Black and brown opera singers of any age. Now, the opera field is niche, and the slice that I'm dealing with is competitions, which can be really important to singers in their career. And I'm saying there's been a lot of barriers there, and I want to see what it's like as an experiment to remove those barriers in this competition space that seems to be very important in a singer's career, can be transformative. Now, I cannot solve the world's problems of opera. I cannot help Italian opera understand why blackface isn't a good look for them. That's not my ministry. Well, it is, but not with this competition. And I find that when people see something is working or seems to be meeting a need, they sometimes want you to meet all the needs.
Right, yeah.
And it's very hard to not take that personally. I've had people say, like, you know, why are you limiting it to these two groups of people? Why not be more inclusive? And I understand where that comes from, and I'm very empathetic to it. But this intersection, for me, of these two groups of people is really important, and those intersections are something that I feel need to go together. And I've learned that from being part of Sphinx Lead and all of that. Just because it doesn't include things does not mean it's exclusive necessarily. Right. So I think really focusing in every day, I say, like, okay, my job is to address the barriers for these two groups of people in the competition space in the opera world. That's my job. I can't solve everything. And so if I'm really laser focused on the impact of what that is, and I can really show the outcomes of that, I think being very specific about what you can do, but also what you will not be doing, is really, the clarity of that is really important, not only for yourself, but for people who are gonna want to help you. And the last point I'll make is, don't try and do it by yourself. I'm at a point in my career where I don't have a choice but to allow other people to help me. And on this competition, I would often wake up like, I have to do all of this, and I suddenly realized, like, there are some folks younger than me that are really hungry to learn about doing this work. We have a wonderful person who has just stepped up and just started doing things, my Shira Bell at Manhattan School of Music. And they just said, what can I do? And then we got to a point where they're just like, I did this. I was like, great, do that. Just do that. Like, I was like, I don't need to read that draft. Go ahead and send it. If something's wrong, it'll be fine. And I think I think as, people of color, we often just feel like, I'm gonna go up this mountain by myself, I'm strong, right? I'm not that strong. I only have so many hours in the day. I can allow Shira to be strong alongside me. And it's been a real gift to welcome that in.
Yeah, I really love what you shared too about being specific and not feeling like you have to solve all the problems. I think that isn't that what we're trying to communicate? When we say impact, it can feel like this amorphous thing. Same thing when you use a word like community. What you have to define what that is. You're not going to assume everyone's definition is the same. So when you're applying or when you're trying to really give your elevator speech on what it is that you're accomplishing, what it is that these funds are going to do for you, it is that specificity, and it's the thing that you do uniquely that addresses a need in your community, and again, defining that community. Mm-hmm. So I want to move on to another question, and this is really now looking into the future. So how do we move? We acknowledge that philanthropy and seeking funds, there's a power dynamic at play. How do we move towards a more transparent and collaborative partnership with foundations? If we're thinking about that equation, grantor plus grantee equals impact. I mean, that's very flowery and like idealistic, but let's go there. Let's think about what is the best case scenario. What does it look like to have true partnership on a project? Have you experienced that? What are some stories or some thoughts you want to share on that? Anyone who wants to go first?
Well, speaking idealistically, I mean, that's where I try to live. My feeling is this money belongs to the people. This money that is in the endowment belongs to the organizations and future applicants. It's their money, and I feel like I work for those organizations. I steward their relationship with the organization. That is how I try to approach my work. On our website, you can go, any one of you, and I encourage you to do so. You can find me on the Howard Gilman Foundation website. You can find time on my calendar. You can just book a time. We'll talk. I want to hear about what your project is. We fund in New York City, but it doesn't mean that I can't learn something from what you're doing, in Atlanta or in Detroit. I want to hear about it because who knows? Maybe it'll be in New York someday. I think this is my job. Any program officers that are here at this conference, go chat with them. Go have a conversation with them. They're here for work, right? So, don't be aggressive, I guess. But we all want to talk to folks who are at this conference. That's why we're here. It's our job. And so I think sometimes you can get into this mentality as an artist. It's just like, oh, they don't want to hear about my project, or I'm not even sure what the questions are. But if you just initiate the conversation, we have these conversations all the time. So we're happy to sit down with you. I'm happy to sit down with you, get coffee, talk about your project, talk about applying for grants, help you think about where you should be applying, and try to just make this world a little bit easier to understand. That's how I think a good relationship should work.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that, I remember when I started at MSM, I assumed it was actually inappropriate to do what James is saying, that it would be a waste of their time for me to just run through an idea. And I have, I've had some great experiences by taking that leap. I met the head of a foundation by being on the Met Opera quiz show, where, by the way, I always lose. I'm the best loser on the Met quiz. But I had a great time with, this guy that's the head of a foundation, and, we went and I asked him if he would, grab lunch, which was more just, to get to know each other better. And then I realized, oh, this could be a really wonderful, opportunity to just say, can I pick your brain about a couple things? And until it happened organically for me, I didn't realize that I should have been doing that all along and making those connections. And it's been one of the best relationships that I've cultivated over the years. Rob Marks, if you ever come along, he is amazing and so generous. He helped me think about my job transition. These are caring, wonderful people. They're people. And I think we forget that when money is between that these are great people who support the arts. So you now have had permission from people up here to approach people and tell them about your brilliant ideas. So I hope you do that.
Yeah, just to piggyback off everything that they said, there is a lot of anxiety because of that power dynamic. You're like, okay, these are the people that hold the wealth, or these are the organizations that hold the wealth, the institutions, but they are people, and one of the things that I have learned and come to just experience is even the relationship that I've built with my funder, the Miami Foundation. And And at first I thought, oh my God, I'm this little organization doing this work. Will they see me? Will I impress them? But no, hey, Portia, how you doing? What's going on? Sending Christmas cards in the mail. It's just developing a rapport, building a relationship. And what I appreciate is that on their side, they are open to that, And so I think, I've had to talk myself into as an individual artist, like amp myself up. Go ahead, Portia. They're just people. Talk to them. Go. But them being open to say, listen, here, schedule time. Come to this event. Like, talk to us. Tell me who you are. Let us get to know who you are. That has definitely changed my mindset and my mindset around like how I approach a private foundation, how I approach people, and just taking away that fear from me. So I appreciate that. And moving forward, I take that with me, And so again, like Alexa said, we give you permission. Call these people. They're people. They have dogs, and kids.
Yeah, and with that, I do want to make space now for some questions, just because we've kind of walked through some of what we were prepared to talk about, but we want to know how we can help you. So if you have questions online, please put them in the Q&A section so that we can see them. If you put them in the chat, they may get lost. We may not be able to answer them, but we want to hear from you and get your insight and also your challenges that you may be facing, so that maybe we can help everyone in this room.
Hello, I'm Brianna Garcon, a current Sphinx engagement liaison, and I will be reading some questions from Hopin. J.R. Nexus Russ stated, are there any options other than a 501c3 that you can talk about more other than an LLC, like B Corps, fiscal sponsors, or anything else you've considered, even if it ended up not being a good fit?
I mean, I think I think the LLC really is a valuable tool because it's so broad and you will have the most support with that. I know that doesn't quite answer the question, but I think we're really scared of the word profit. You should get your coin, right? You should be making money. There's nothing wrong with getting money. I don't know. I really think that it's an important place to start. And I think even if you do have a 501c3, understanding how most businesses work, because that is the way most people giving money think. I think that's often you need to help people understand the nonprofit side. Most people are really approaching life from the LLC side.
Yeah, if it's a sole member LLC, I'm not an accountant, but I know that you can just file through your own personal taxes. I'm looking at my partner here. Yeah. However, if you're in a string quartet or a wind quintet, you might want to think about a partnership, a limited liability partnership. Again, this is not accounting advice, but that way it lives within, all the partners have like equal stake in it, equal share. And I know that a lot of groups have started an LLP and then have gone on to, form a nonprofit after that.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say I agree. Or don't be afraid of like the corporate, filing an S corp. That's not, and actually what I've learned in filing an LLC as a single member LLC, it actually works better if I file as a corporation because then I don't get taxed twice. But yeah, and going someone and also about the fiscal sponsorship, I think, so with Teeny Violini as a LLC and New Canon Chamber Collective as a 501c3, I've been able to be my own fiscal sponsor for grants, and I'm always very transparent about that relationship. They're two separate accountings, two separate bank accounts, two separate taxes or whatever, but I'm always very transparent with my funders about, listen, I do have a fiscal sponsor. It's an organization that I founded. I mean, I have a board, and they're like, okay, or they're like, oh, no. So you have to be transparent about that, or you can, through networking and through seeing what organizations are in your community, that can provide fiscal sponsorship if you want to, go into the for-profit tax designation.
Can I just say one more thing about fiscal sponsorship, which is this is a really important decision, which fiscal sponsor you use, and we've all heard of many of them. And I recommend, going and looking to see, like, well, what do I get charged when I get a donation through this fiscal sponsor? And you can compare because they're not all the same, and sometimes it's like hard to figure out. But if you look local, maybe rather than going for the big national one, that might be a better option for you. Or if you have an organization that's kind of like yours, that's been around for 20 years, sometimes they'll help you, and they might not even take a fee from you. So think about that.
Yeah, I think your local community foundation is a great resource to just network, understand some of the partnerships that may exist in your community already as you're thinking about what you're starting, if that's where you are in the journey. And I'll share two, just personally, and maybe not arts related, but there's a cause that I'm a part of. It's a local park, so a city-owned park, right? And we're a friends group, which is just loosely, there's no official 501c3 for a friends group. You just are volunteers. But we do have a fiscal sponsor so that we're able to collect funds and then use it for the park and activate the space, plant a flower garden, just whatever it is that you're trying to do. There are many options for you to get to have the access to resources that you need, but still accomplish what you want to do.
Hey there. My name is Walter Dunkley. I am an educator. I'm also a fellow trombone player down in South Florida. And there actually one question that I do have. I do have an LLC, and I also have a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit. And this particular question may be out of the scope of what we're talking about, but I just kind of want to get an idea of what you guys thought. What are some of the options? What are some of the revenues outside of just trying to receive donations and applying for grants where you can get a consistent realm of revenue and finances for your nonprofit organization?
Very good question, sir.
Would you mind just repeating it one more time just so we can make sure we answer it well?
Sure, of course. So what are some general ways to receive consistent financial income for your nonprofit if you have a 501c3 outside of just generally getting donations and applying for grants?
I mean, it sounds like you're talking about like earned revenue, right? So most organizations, if they're nonprofit, have two forms of revenue. One is going to be all the contributed revenue, which they're getting from their grants and their donations, and then they're getting, sometimes they have money from earned revenue, and that's usually from selling tickets to your events. That can be a major source of earned revenue for organizations. If they have space, it's because they're renting their space and they're able to earn some money through that. I would also say like memberships to your organization. So what are folks, some people are buying in maybe $100 a year, or maybe it's a Patreon type thing where they're paying on a monthly amount. And that way those people who are maybe ticket buyers first, then they become Patreon members, and then now they're giving you money, right? Now they're donors. And so I think those are the ways that I have most commonly seen in earned revenue, folks who can bring money outside of just donations.
Is that okay once you are, if you're 501c3 and you're a nonprofit, to say, oh, I'm getting monies for membership or whatnot?
Yes, and this is exactly Alexa's point around this question around profit. We think nonprofit. 501c3 is really just a tax designation. It's not anything about how you run your business. You can make a lot of money. You can have a lot of surplus and then carry it over to the next year. So I want people to realize that people at a nonprofit can get paid well. People at a nonprofit, organizations can take in earned revenue. It can be many times the amount of contributed revenue. So there's no issues with earned revenue in a nonprofit.
And profit and revenue are, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between those things. So you're talking, I mean, you need to pay your bills. You need to bring in money, right? And so the filing has nothing to do with that in a way, like as James said. It sounds like you might be talking about like passive income. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
More just like set it and forget it.
It's kind of a
Yeah.
umbrella type question, but yeah, so just, income that you can get on a consistent basis, outside of just asking for donations and applying for grants, and then also different ways and opportunities you can actually get some income, even if it's not super consistent, happening every month or every, by month or whatnot.
I was gonna say too, like, piggybacking off of what James said was, yes, so a good practice or habit would be to study the market, see what else is out there that is similar to what you're doing, how your organization is serving, or what it's doing in the community, and see what they're doing, see how they're generating income for the thing that they're doing. Because again, it's and figuring out what your business model is. Are you a business to business? Are you a business to customer? What is it that you do? What services that you can provide? Or how is it, like doing an internal audit of the things that you have and the resources that you have access to, and how can you monetize that? So it's just researching the market researching the market. That's what I would do. Like, it's just that.
Yeah, thanks. I think everything everyone said, I think, this goes back to diversifying your streams of income and thinking like a business, and understanding that there are feelings, there's emotions associated with that sometimes. Like, you may react to that in a certain way, like, oh, I'm a business, that means I'm like money hungry or something. But no, I mean, you want to think about your purpose and making sure that you don't rely too much on one thing, because you want to be able to continue to provide the services that you are to the community that you're serving.
Sandy, I think that's a really important point. And I get this question a lot about the business thing. I went to business school. Brandon Neal over there is in the same program you're in finance and accounting now, right? I'll pray for you. I learned more in business school about who I am and my values than I did getting my master's in opera. I really did, because you have to decide what your values are when you take money, and when you scale that money and you decide what your worth and value is and how important that is to you. And if you work as hard as you do for the things that we believe in, then you deserve to have enough money to recover from that work too. You deserve to bring in enough money so that all the energy and good you're putting out can also serve you.
Well, the previous question actually was a very good question, and I like how you answered it. James? Yeah. Yes. And I like that you gave that level of like having Patreon and just having different levels that one can kind of buy into, so that you can keep your profit, make a profit, as also share with the community. My question is more so towards the community, and being a community of LLCs and a community of 501c3s, reaching back. When I say being a community, being a collective group of people, trying to reach others within your community. We all are from Miami, and one of the things that I think that is kind of scarce down there, by the way, is you don't get to see the faces behind what makes the dollars, what makes the teeny violinis. You don't get to see those faces as much. So one thing I do applaud Portia in is that she's there. She's a face in that community. But how can that face be very broad around that big city of Miami? Most of our donors, I'm sure a lot of those guys and ladies and gentlemen sit over on Miami Beach, and they're in their nice homes, or on Fisher Island or somewhere. How can we bring Fisher Island? And if Portia probably can explain what Fisher Island is. How can we bring Fisher Island and all of those locations to, let's say, like a Liberty City? And there are some great minds that are in Liberty City. And just throw this little joke out there. I think I better go apply to a business school, because that is one of the things that I think that is most needed in our communities. Though you have the Portias, you have James, you have Manhattan School, but does the community see that? How does it connect with the community and the impact that it will have? That's my question.
So if I hear you, I think you're trying to ask about visibility of the impact. Is that the question? Okay. So I guess it really depends on your organization. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to this.
Collaboration of organizations, not just
Sure.
organization.
I mean, I think this speaks to just the way that everything is kind of siloed in our current society. I don't know. This is like maybe broader than the topic of this conversation, but yeah, we often we're busy people. We operate and we try to do our best with the resources that we have, and sometimes we don't see the value perhaps in stepping outside. And I say this for the limited resources a small organization has, but also just people working within medium and large organizations. When you go to let's say you go to the Chamber of Commerce in your town and you just are in the room and networking, I think that has power, just being present and in the room. And we don't think about the different rooms we have access to all the time. We only think about our sphere and our scope. So I guess my recommendation, and understanding that there are limitations on everyone's time and everyone's energy, but maybe step outside of your comfort zone, look for those chambers of commerce, those networking opportunities that are in your local community. Foundations in your community actually have really great convening power too. There are professional organizations that you might not be a part of, like American Fundraising Professionals or Association of Fundraising Professionals. Yeah, that's it. Those rooms really talk about these things all the time that are great resources that you don't have to maybe meet like everyone in the room and be like this really extroverted person and get remembered, but there can be one connection that you get by just going to an event that may benefit you down the line. So
What about the opposite way, that the event coming to your
sure. So yeah, I think again it speaks because you were talking about donors living in a certain area of your community feeling like there's this disconnect with where the work happens maybe. I think that again just speaks to like power imbalances that just exists in our society where, I can think about areas of Atlanta that the money's concentrated, right? And so they may never venture into the neighborhoods that they're trying to support if that's where their money's going. But then I think that's also the power that a nonprofit would have, is to invite donors to see. Like I'm thinking about in Atlanta, there's the West Side where there's a lot of money being invested in retaining the identity of the West Side, but also developing it for the future. And how many donors then go to the West Side and like walk the street and like see where their dollars are and actually see the people that their dollars are impacting? It's just like, oh, my corporation is just going to write a check, and we're going to say we're part of the West Side Future Fund. I think that organizations like the West Side Future Fund has an opportunity to bring people in to kind of bridge that divide. So I don't know, I guess that's my answer. I don't know if anyone wants to. Yeah, we acknowledge that there's power imbalance, there's unfairness, and we're going to try to cross that divide when we can.
Good morning. I'm truly enjoying this talk. I feel like I needed this talk 5 years ago, but here I am now. My name is Holly Nelson. I'm currently a Dean's Doctoral Fellow at Peabody, and I also recently received a Fulbright grant to study tango violin music in Argentina, which I'm very excited about. So thank you. I've been applying to a lot of grants for the first time in my life over the last 2 years, and I've luckily been very successful with a lot of those grants, and I've discovered that I enjoy writing grant applications. I enjoy writing. I find it challenging and interesting, and hopefully I have some aptitude.
Can I have your number?
Yeah. Hopefully I have some aptitude for grant writing, and I hope to do this a lot in the future, especially because I have plans to form ensembles and seek city or government assistance with those ensembles, things like that. and through teaching as an educator, looking for grants to support my students, things of that nature. So what would your advice be for somebody who finds that they enjoy writing grant applications and wants to continue doing that in the future? First of all, what's your advice to continue developing that skill, developing grant writing? And then or anybody who's interested in writing grants, how can you leverage your track record of success with writing grant applications? How can you leverage that when you apply for university positions or in arts administration or education organizations, things of that nature? Thank you.
Okay, so why are you applying for jobs at institutions?
Well,
Or are you just asking in general?
I'm asking in general, but I'm hoping to apply for teaching positions as a violin professor.
Okay.
When I return from my Fulbright grant, and or funding ensembles, starting ensembles. I anticipate that I'll need some grant support in the future to support my performing activities, things like that.
I mean, you sound very entrepreneurial. That's why I ask, why are you applying to work for somebody else when you clearly can do the work and build something for yourself that you have complete autonomy over, and you can guide it and build it and nurture it? I mean, I'm not like so for leveraging your skill as a grant writer, I would say, there are a lot of small organizations, small artists who really don't have a clue, and as soon as you you can figure out and find out who those people are through networking, through small organizations, artists meet up in your group, and then have your card, have your pitch, and say, listen, have your fees, look at the market, research the market, see what other people are charging, what they're doing, the time that they're spending, and and determine what your costs, your cost of service is, and which, how much you want to make. And then, present that to people. Say, listen, this is what I do. I'm really successful. I have a track record. I really want to help artists. And that's how you start. Really, you start. That's how I started. I started with one person, one business, one organization. And so, and then you can just build. Word of mouth is the best form of advertising. And then leveraging that same skill for getting jobs. I mean, who doesn't want a successful grant writer on their team? Someone that they can say, listen, this is some money that's out there, can you help us apply for it? Make sure when you put that, you leverage that in your interview, that you also account for that in your salary that you're asking as well. So that's what I'm going to say.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. I think that was our last question, unfortunately, but we are available after, and now we know who's in this room too, so I encourage you all, if you're having the same struggle as someone next to you, use this conference to really tackle the challenges that you have in your life. I want to close going back to this idea of truth, telling the truth, but also having hope. I just want to ask each person on this panel, what is your truth and what is your hope?
I'll start with truth. The money is going to be very important in your pursuit of being an artist, and there's really no getting away from that. I have a full-time job. Before that, I had a part-time job. I was just trying to have health insurance. So the truth is, whether you marry well, or you have a full-time job, or you win the lottery, money is going to really help you with your artistic practice. The hope, though, is that no matter where you figure out your places in life, that you are able to pursue your artistic practice in a way that is satisfying, whether that's playing in your church, playing in a community band, just playing piano on your own, or playing with your family, or being a professional soloist who travels around the world. Hopefully you'll find fulfillment in your artistic practice.
I would say for the truth part, and I think those of you who are parents will understand, there's only so much time, only so much time in a day, in the year, in this life. Every year I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that. It's just what it is. There's only so much time, and you can't do everything. Our competition finals are next Friday, and I can't believe that, and I have a lot to do between now and then, but it's gonna happen, right? It's the time it gets done, because it has to. The thing that keeps me hopeful, I'm not a person that yields to pessimism. I just don't. It's just rule one for me in my life. And my hope is that I can get a whole lot done in this limited amount of time that I get on Earth. And I'm being really reflective because I'm leaving MSM after 5 years, and I'm really, really proud of the work that has been accomplished in those 5 years. Every performance we have includes an underrepresented creator, every single one. That's a lot to get done in 5 years in a very conservative conservatory. So yeah, I think those two things have to go together, that truth and hope. I really love that, Sandy.
My truth is that sometimes I get really frustrated because I am doing the work, the necessary work, and I feel like I have to still prove myself, and it's still not enough. Oh, okay, well, can you do this $10,000 on a $10,000 budget? And I'm like, what? No. But I see other organizations, more established organizations, getting the funding, doing, and having the time and, you know, the history, but not even doing a fraction of what I'm doing in the small time that I've started in the last 2 years. And it's frustrating to me, and I try not to live in that space. You know, I try not to live in the, okay, they're, you know, but I'm hopeful because it's happened on several occasions that funders or, you know, someone with a philanthropic heart or people in my community through grassroots efforts or whatever will see and acknowledge that the work that I've been doing is worthy and worthwhile. And I won't have to prove myself, constantly prove myself. I won't have to continue to jump through hoops or, you know, or whatever in order to, you know, get the funding that we need to do the work. And so that's my hope, you know, and I hold on to that.
I hope you leave with some truth and hope today. But thank you for attending, and have a great conference.